Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second episode on our Let's Speak Up series on suicide prevention. Today's episode, we have Educators Speak Up. And I am Gayatri Chadwa, co founder of GMH Foundation. We started this series with a mission to create awareness about anxiety, depression, and to prevent suicides as much as we can. And what better way than us to address to the students and educators being the pillars of the education system in our society and across the globe? What better way to address the issues in the education system which the students face, the educators face, and many teachers who are budding into this field face day to day? Today we have a beautiful, experienced panel of amazing ladies with me who have been in the field of education for almost 2 decades. And I am super excited to introduce them. First, we have with us Ms. Rajni Julka, who's an educationist, a pedagogist, with more than 17 years of experience in the field of education and 15 plus years in as administrative and leadership roles, a principal, a HOD, a keynote speaker, and a lot more to her expertise. I welcome you, ma'am, to our panel discussion. The next we have Dr. Daksha Sharma, who's a PhD in international law, an assistant professor of law at Bennett University, Times of India Group, Greater Noida. She's also a keynote speaker, an author, and has a lot of publications and research papers to her kitty. Welcome, Dr. Daksha, to our panel discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Gayatri. Thank you so much for the invite.
And the last panelist with us today is Ms. Anne George. She started her career as a school counselor, and with more than 20 years of experience, now she has started and shifted her career to influencing the lives of upcoming medical professionals, as working as a student life coordinator at Believers Medical College and Hospital, Tiruvallai, Kerala. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Kari.
So as I said, all of these ladies have an amazing experience in the field of education. And me being an educator myself, have seen the struggles that children go through in their growing up years, starting from early childhood. So ma'am, I would like to pose my first question to Rajni ma'am. Ma'am, you have been part of the system for a very long time. And what are your views on inculcating mental health curriculum in the school, especially in the current scenario where students are a lot more, there is uncertainties. There are so many issues that the students are facing. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you, Gayatri, for such a wonderful question, and thank you, GMHA, to inviting me for this. Yes, I'm in the system for almost 17 and a half years, worked inside the school capacity as principal, EdTech leader, working with youth, teachers, educators now across. It's very surprising that we have close to 15 million of would say lives, especially related to mental health issues. And these group is actually the young birds. And it will be too bewildering to hear the word curriculum, because actually the curriculum itself is burdening up the students a lot. So mental health issue is an important area to emphasize and bring within the school system, yes. But what could the content be, and how it should be imparted are the two major areas we need to look into. We should not burden the student with another set of curriculum besides the subject. It should be in a way, but for the most important area is why it is important. If you see the data today, 15% of the population of 15 million individuals are basically suffering suffering from mental health issues, and 10% of them, which is actually is not treated. Only 5% gets treated. And depression and suicide issues are the two major issues within the entire mental health issues. So are we addressing these issues from the early childhood? If you see the concept of the Japan, the entire education system starts with the social, emotional well-being of the student at the early age, because at the early childhood education says your motor skills and cognitive skills are at the peak to be developed. Are we actually working on the psychosocial stressors? There are three important psychosocial stressors we can say talk about today. One, I would say, is the growing pressure of the academics. I'm happy that new education policy has actually brought that to 50% curtail and 50% to the core curricular and the life skills and other arts and culture, bringing, value kind of education in the system. Competitive exams is another, and the third, which is the highest pressure, which actually is bringing the major kind of mental health issue, is today is the social media, the media pressure. So in and around these, actually I would say curriculum would not be a right word, rather it can be a training or the pedagogy approach within the school system, which we can call it as a life skills training, can be brought into the school system to actually work in the curriculum, which can, there are a lot of many topics in and around, like from gender sensitivity to dealing with bullying, we're dealing with managing the pressures of the academics, peer pressure, home pressures, improving your emotional intelligence, improving your, spiritual quotient, building empathy within the system. So there are a number of topics which can be brought within the system, but being mindful of bringing a special curriculum, according to me as an educationist, will be a burden, another set of burden to learn value system. The value systems are basically to be acquired, to be inculcated. So why not to bring equip them with the necessary skills? I would also say building resilience is something which will help. So these are some of the areas, bringing the training part within the curriculum. Now it's very interesting we talk about this STEM curriculum. I use the word STEAM since last 6 years. People have been questioning me that, Rajni, why do you, from where does this word A comes? A has many values. M comes from many words. M comes from your movement. M comes from your momentum. N comes from your mind. A stands not only for arts, it comes for your aesthetic values. It's adaptability. So actually A and M has its own value, which can be blended in your science, technology, maths. So there are practical experience and learning experiences which a child should have. I have been a system, as you rightly said. I mean, itself bringing these kinds of sessions are considered to be a time wasters. But actually, if you see the cognitive skill of a child, it's not only academics. You have to bring the socio part of it, emotional part of it. It teaches you handling life challenges. Let's all of us actually accept it that school is not only about academics. It's about making a child ready for the life challenges he or she will be thrown into after your 10th and 12th. Of course, career, job prospect is there, but the pressure of those also brings mental issues. Are we making our workforce, the millennials or the coming young generations, ready for that? So bringing life skills coaching. I was talking to someone at the international level other day. It's not only bringing about the life skills coaching or the mental health coaching for the students. Why are we pressurizing our kids alone? Teachers also need mental health training. Educators also need mental health training. I think we need to develop the cognitive leadership pipeline. Cognitive coaching is to be required at the education level. Every stakeholders in the education, from parents to the business leaders who are directly or indirectly involved, like a vendors, bringing so many kinds of programs, technology within the school system, the students themselves, the teachers, everyone, the principal, the chairman, everyone should undergo a cognitive coaching leaderships certification. Of course, it has to be blended within the course of the students. The objective has to be very, very clear. How do you bring in the curriculum rather than burdening as a subject, blend it in a classroom? I'll give you a very small example. Like we talk about lot of concepts in maths or sciences. We try that children should learn that, but are we trying it to bring it through a play role method? Now, when we are bringing it through a storytelling, or we are doing it through a role play, or we are making a project, at that time, teacher observation, a classroom observation, or group observation activity is so important to understand the feelings, the emotions of every child in a classroom. This is a very important case study. I would request all the principal or the educators to take up. They should actually have a report structure of observing when the child is working on that. How does he react to his peer student? How he is involved? Is he sidelined? Is he feeling so important? What is stressing him? You know, these observation, of course, we do have special educators within the school, but they have to be at par. They have to sit within these classrooms, make observations, talk to the student individually, not like direct talking, but on a friendly terms. It is very, very important that building such kind of empathy will actually a indirect way of incorporating. So I would suggest that bringing mental health training within the school has to be come through a life skills training. But first, training of the educators and teachers are more important. As before we were starting this session, I heard that generally casually we were discussing that teachers do not know what to do. So who is who is taking the charge of your youth? Who is taking the charge of the student? Are they well equipped? The new education policy has a very strong strategy. It's lovely and awesome. But the challenge is the workforce? Are the educators well equipped? Are they aware of what is there in the strategy? What is in the new curriculum framework? How it is to be implemented? What are the kinds of pedagogy? We have to bring blended learning in the picture. We have to bring inquiry based structure in the picture to bring to talk about mental health issues. There should be one classroom, but one classroom is when a child is in a classroom, it is like that 20 pupil or that 15 pupil in the classroom is actually under one umbrella, and that's the home. That's a second home for them. So the way we live in our home or a family, we talk to our parents, we talk to our siblings, grandparents, neighbors. Are we letting the children to open up and talk under that one wall to each other? Because sharing, the kids, the young children, their motor skills are very early, they develop. So let them open up and share, because it said sharing is caring. So these are some of the ways in a pedagogical approach these can be handled. But yes, I would advocate with the policy of bringing mental health curriculum. I would not say use the word curriculum. I would say more about skill development within the classroom structure, but cannot be directly as a subject, but can be indirectly blended in each curriculum structure. So curriculum mapping, I would say, has to be done where what fits has to be brought across, and it should be more into a playway and fun learning method. Because when you improve the psychological well-being of a student, you are actually educating a young population that will make the society more educated, informed, and sensitized towards mental health, which is a very critical need in current times. So that is all from my side, Gayatri.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. And it really makes sense that we need to go from the top down approach rather than starting with the students. And first educate the educators and then tell them and empower them, equip them with the tools with which they can work with their students and thus empowering them in return. I completely agree. And with this thought, I mean, being in the educational field myself, I would say this also gives me a thought that we had a value education period that was called the zero period during our time. And that can be used right now to implement more about the values, yes, but also the structures and getting the emotional and mental well-being of the students into picture. And that can definitely be, introduced into the system.
That's a very good idea. Gayatri, just one tip. I would say that you have to be a global leader, a global educationist when you talk about this. When you use the word zero, standalones have no value. So when we were having value education during the zero period, the 10 minutes, we thought, okay, it's just a time to somehow utilize, rather than calling it as a quality time period, because we have an activity which is called quality time circle, calling it a quality time period and devoting a period in a very well-defined project-based and progress-based learning, and bringing that not for 10 minutes or 40-minute periods would be much better. Maybe you spread it across in which form, bringing different kinds of activity when you're doing, then it will be, I would suggest, more a quality time period rather than zero period. This concept of zero period has to be somehow waved off. While sitting on the chair as a principal, I
Completely
always
agree.
appreciated this.
I completely agree. And it should not be used as an extra time to complete your school
Right.
syllabus.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
makes so much sense. Thank you so much, Rajni ma'am, for sharing that with us. With that, I would like to come to Dr. Daksha. Ma'am, you are so much into the law side and you are a law professor. And with our suicide prevention webinar today, we have gathered to understand how we can, mental health can be viewed in the education domain. And how do you think we can break the stigma and in the mental health in various educational institutions? As well, I would also I would like to ask whether you can shed some light about how we can do about the different laws around it, or the different ways in which we can help students and prevent this in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Gayatri, for the question. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Ms. Mansi Dholakia also for extending this invite to me. And congratulations to Global Mental Health Foundation and the entire team for organizing this wonderful event. With due respect to the co-panelists, I would like to give the answer of this question. So first of all, when we talk about the concept of suicide, or rather, I would say a positive aspect, life. So when we see life, every person wants to live. He chooses death only when he or she finds that death is less painful than living. So everyone prefers to live. This is what is stated under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution also, that no person shall be deprived of his life or liberty except according to the procedure established by law. When we talk in the context of suicide or the aspect of mental health, there is a journey of case laws which starts from Maruti Shripati Dubbal versus State of Maharashtra in the year 1987, and it goes on till 2018 in the case of euthanasia, wherein the passive euthanasia was found to be legal by the court. So we see that this journey is broad enough, and the pertinent question before the court was that whether right to life includes right to die also. So there were two landmark judgments like Maruti Shripati Dubbal, and the other one was P. Rathinam versus Union of India in the year 1994. In both the judgments, it was found by the court that right to die is the part of right to life. So herein we saw that the court took the view that there are certain circumstances wherein mental health issues crop up, and because of which the person take the extreme decision of dying. Then this judgment was overruled or reversed in the case of Gyan Singh Kaur versus State of Punjab in the year 1996, and it was so held by the court that life is a bigger concept. We cannot come up with the judgments supporting suicide. So the above mentioned judgments were overruled in 1996. Later on, it was found with this 2017 Mental Health Care Act that there are conditions which result into the death of the person, and there are conditions wherein because of severe stress or because of poor mental health, a person takes the extreme step of suicide. So there is one particular section, that is section 115 of Mental Health Care Act, which says that if a person is committing suicide, then if it is found that he is under severe stress, then this cannot be considered to be the case falling under section 309 of IPC. Let me tell the viewers here that section 309 of IPC, that is Indian Penal Code, criminalizes suicide. So if a person is attempting suicide and if he is failed in the attempt to commit suicide, then it is punishable by law. The punishment which is so provided is up to 1 year of simple imprisonment or with fine or with both. So it is a kind of bailable as well as cognizable offense. So cognizable means that a police officer can take cognizance of such offenses without the permission of the court. So he can suo motu take cognizance of such offenses. So now, interestingly, we see that the whole journey, which started from 1987 and which ended here in 2018, I would say, it marks a sea change in the law relating to mental health as well as suicide. So now the balanced view is that if a person is suffering from severe stress or some mental health condition, then it is a duty of the court to take note of such circumstances and to decriminalize, to partially decriminalize section 309, considering his situation, considering his mental health. So these are the cases where an extreme care or medical attention is to be provided to the person who is opting for suicide. That is the extreme step for ending the life. So these are some of the interesting aspects of right life and right to die. So another instance is when we talk about the concept of euthanasia. So the journey of euthanasia starts, the legal journey, I would say, it starts from very long, but it was settled in 2011 with the judgment of Aruna Shanbag versus Union of India. And in that case, it was held by the court that passive euthanasia is permissible, but active euthanasia is not permissible. Then after that, recently in 2018, we have the case that is a common cause case. And in that case also it was held that passive euthanasia is permissible. So if a person wants to die and if he is suffering from persistent vegetative state, then in such cases, passive euthanasia is permissible in India. But still, the law does not permit active euthanasia. Passive euthanasia is permitted as per law. Now coming to your question of the mental health in the education sector, I would like to say that it is more or less related to the attitude which the person opts for. So that's why it is always necessary to have a positive mindset towards life. Students at the school level and at the university level should be taught that life is something which is the most precious gift of the supreme power. So it has to be taken that way. There are challenges which are going to come in the life, and these challenges make us alive. If life goes on smoothly and if there are no challenges, then there is no enjoyment in the life. So that is what is to be taught at the school level and at the university level, and students should be made strong enough to face the challenges of the life. So this entire education system should have one set that is in relation to the positive mindset, in relation to the decision making, wherein the mental health aspects of the students should be covered broadly by the faculty members who are expert in that particular area. Because we observe that in universities, there are very many courses. So particularly in our university, Bennett University, we have a life skill management course. And therein students are taught about the skills, about the life skills. So that is something very interesting, and all the professionals, like all the students from all the disciplines, have to participate in that course. So the point which I'm trying to bring home is that learning life skill is very important at the school level and at the university level, and it should not stop there itself. They should carry it lifelong so that they are able to face the challenges in the most suitable way. So thank you for this question. This is what my answer is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daksha. Especially the laws and the rulings about life and death are so important, and not many people know about it. And it's really important to understand these things. And as you said, that we need to include that attitude within students. Just give me a second. So this is what I feel is where we know that when people are and students require that. So I feel personally that we at early age itself we need to understand and acknowledge that saying no or not being on top is equally okay. You don't have to always be on top. And second important thing is, I think we need students to understand and be sensitive to say listening to no. A lot of students these days, because of are just getting by, when somebody says no to them, it affects them in a very bad way. Or dealing with failure, there have been many movies about it, dealing with failure and all of it. But I personally feel that that needs to hit home, and we need to include that more in the education system, make that more sensitive. And as you rightly said, not just at the school levels or university levels, but from a very early childhood itself, that needs to be done. And along with the educators, I think it's also important that parents take this message, that groom your children, and in a way that they can grow, flourish, and accept that life is a beautiful gift from the Almighty. Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Daksha.
Thank you, sir.
I'll come to Anne ma'am right now. You had, especially your journey from a school counselor to now being with the medical students, you must have seen a lot of students who are facing anxiety or depression and require counseling. But in our country at the moment, counseling or mental health, the moment you see a psychologist or you require counseling, there is a big taboo to it. Parents are not open, or even students. There is a whole lot of, oh, am I, questions. Why a counselor? So in this scenario, what is your advice on, for counseling, and how do you think we can raise suicide awareness or prevention awareness amongst the education sector, between the students, the parents, as well as the educators?
All right. Thank you very much, Gayatri, and thanks to GMA for allowing me to be part of this panel. At the outset, I must admit that I am no expert in suicide prevention, but I have interacted with children and been among young people, I think, ever since I stepped out of childhood. And probably this was what attracted me towards wanting to work among young people. So I've been a school counselor ever since the beginning of my career. And I have come across, honestly, by God's grace, I haven't had even one student who was at the brink of suicide, although of late, after I stepped out of the school system, there are students who talk to me about wanting to end it all. And probably a few years ago, I would have thought twice about, why are they saying that, and the need to take them seriously. But today I know better. It's from all that has been evolving. And what I have come to find out, so I actually was going through statistics, and I found out that the NCRB has said that between the ages of 14 and 18, the number of young people who have died by suicide is 24,568, of which 13,000 are girls. And this number is growing every year. And add the pandemic to the mix, and then we've been hearing all the numbers going up. So in that context, I also was then looking for why suicide, why young people? I mean, we hear a lot about suicides among young adults. So there is that gap. 18 to 40 is usually the covered age, but what about the younger ones? And I saw within that also that among different countries, the priorities for why suicide, the causes of suicide in different countries are different. And in India, what I found was one of the top causes would probably be failed aspirations for a better future. So as loving parents, we all raise our children in well protected, environments, thereby inadvertently restricting their autonomy and freedom to make choices for their own life. And that becomes so under pressure, they follow what their parents say. Now, this is a generalized statement, but then for the large part, I think it is true. And that can cause some amount of distress in young people. They cannot have these open conversations with the adults in their lives. Added to that is failure in examinations, high academic pressure. I think Ms. Rajni put it out very nicely. Also goes out, added on to that is family conflicts. And then you have these love affairs, illegitimate pregnancies, physical abuse. And of course, today, I would say probably for the past 10 to 15 years, there's a surge in diagnosed mental health disorders among children, like depression, anxiety, panic disorder, and substance abuse too now, especially among senior secondaries. And then we have learning disabilities, and all of these have added into being reasons why we have more children now feeling fed up of life. And come the pandemic, and we've had the online education stealing children away from social interactions, the feeling of detachment, loneliness, boredom, unable to use their energies for anything, and then getting lost in the virtual world, and probably even becoming victims of online predation. And then finally, screen time. And screen time has added to mood swings and irritability. And so the causes are just now multiplying. And these would probably be what I would consider the reasons why we are met with more and more young people becoming suicidal. So good thing, again, like Ms. Rajni said, the NEP is promising. And I found actually 3 significant points within the NEP, the 2020 NEP, that has, focused towards holistic and well-rounded individuals. That's what we are aiming for. And teaching children, including within the curriculum, mental health. So lovely things. And then the big thing, and again, Ms. Rajni mentioned that I noticed, for schools to have positive learning environments, it's not just up to curriculum, but it's also up to the adults who facilitate this for them. So something that I came across, while I was doing
Hello?
It featured this lady called Ann Moss. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yes, now we can.
Okay. So it featured this woman called Ann Moss Rogers, who lost her son to suicide at the age of 20 because of depression and substance abuse. And she was a digital marketing consultant, and her life turned around since then. So she began a blog called Emotionally Naked and went on to write a book called Emotionally Naked, a teacher's guide to preventing suicide and recognizing students at risk. And she brought out some very, very interesting things within it that I want to make mention of today. So let's face it that our teachers are come ready into the education system armed with their subject knowledge and probably with some knowledge of how to manage a class and everything. But I don't know what it is, even though I do know that the B.Ed curriculum does, to some extent, cover child psychology. It does not really address social and emotional learning. And social and emotional learning, I don't believe, just like Ms. Rajni said, it's not a subject to be added on to burden the teachers, to burden the students. I think my internet connection is not very good. Can I be heard? Am I heard?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Sorry. So, so social and emotional learning becomes very important. And it is not just in teaching, it's integrating it into the curriculum, as well as modeling it. And we always say children learn by imitation. And what the adults around them model is what they are going to absorb. So how we come across. So I am taking it as an educator's perspective. Definitely, I think parents play a huge role, but right now, from an educator's perspective, I want to address this. So as teachers, for us to be able to model what we want children to be. So I read this very interesting small blog post where the teacher had gone out of the class, not out of the class, at the door of her class, when her class was sitting there, she had an argument with another teacher. And it was loud, and the children were watching. And she came back visibly upset, walked in visibly upset. And the teacher was fully aware of what she had done. And so they have this, I'll discuss that strategy a little later. But what she did was, they have this little counter with bracelets, a red bracelet, a green bracelet, and a yellow bracelet, which indicates how the person is feeling. So the red bracelet was one for the teacher feeling upset, or students could pick if they were having a bad day, they wore a red bracelet. So she picked up the red bracelet, she wore it, and that was her telling the students, you know what, even I am vulnerable. Even I am capable of doing that. I am also having a bad day. And I think that action speaks much louder than words. And that would be the first thing a teacher can do, model, right? And some of the things that I think that are really important, apart from integrating social emotional learning into the curriculum. So understanding emotions, managing emotions, setting goals, showing empathy for others, all of these can be modeled as well. So another thing is nurturing student relationships. Something that we, I think inadvertently again do is encourage competition. And that turns us against each other. Cooperative learning, collaboration, all of these areas are now missing. So it's each to himself. So there are no relationships. And where there is relationship, where there is a feeling of belonging, where there is togetherness, and this is not just student to student, it could be student in the school, student with the family, the school with the community, all of these, emboldens the need for relationship. And so nurturing relationships is, student relationships is another point. So another thing that I'd like to see is teaching coping skills in the classroom. So we have life skills. I think Ms. Daksha talked about life skills, and within life skills comes critical thinking, problem solving, managing stress, coping strategies. All of these areas are things to be experienced in the classroom. So if they're not going to, it's not enough to learn in a class about problem solving. They've got to solve problems. And that's what teaches them that, because life is going to be adverse. And now sitting in a medical college, I can absolutely identify, because suddenly students come out from grade 12 hoping and full of aspirations, and they come into medical college and the content is overwhelming for them. And people are at the brink of giving up, people sacrifice rest, they don't have balanced living. And I sometimes feel, you cannot teach children that at the age of 19 and 20. So it becomes so important to inculcate this within the school curriculum so that children learn it at that early age. And finally, I think every school should have a protocol about how suicide attempts or thoughts of suicide or a child in trouble must be handled, a protocol within the school. So if teachers develop the sensitivity to identify a child, maybe a child is running to the clinic all the time, maybe a child is sleeping a lot in the class, maybe a child has become completely withdrawn, can teachers see these signs and identify them as potential risk factors? And so if the teacher sees this, if the teacher can extend to herself, wonderful. But the teacher should know who do we go to, or the school should have a step-to-step policy about who does the teacher go to. And from there, where do they go to? Where can a child be taken for help? Sometimes I feel our teachers behave as if it's none of my business. And that is dangerous, because the teacher is the one who sees the child most in the class, not the school counselor. The school counselor gets in the picture only when, either when you're invited or when you go for an SEL class, but no other time. So the teacher is really the crux over there. And for the teacher to be able to be sensitive, to have a conversation with the child, listen to the child. I'm sorry, I feel bad for teachers because the workload of teachers is so high today. So it's really hard for the teachers. I acknowledge that. But that doesn't take away the risk of our children wanting to take their lives. Right? That I think I've kind of covered what I thought I should.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was such a beautiful and such an important thing that, these need to be inculcated and we need to address and understand. I think along with being educators, we need to be keen observers of the way our children are, and if there are any changes in them, if there is also a lot of times, as you said, because I have been, as I said, we are educators here. We have so much pressures of, be it you are working with a school, a university, or in any position, there are so much pressures around us that these minute details are sometimes not, we consciously, but unconsciously, subconsciously, they are ignored, or, we do not look at them with a very open mind, or we just ignore them saying, oh, this might be just my thinking, it might not be too much. Also, somewhere I feel the society as a whole, the shift that has happened where if a teacher says anything, there is a lot of bombarding onto the teacher as to why, how could you say this is my child, and the loss of sensitivity around the subject, and the focus has somewhere shifted from the student to the score that the student gets. as a whole. And I think that focus needs to come back to the student. And as you beautifully said, Rajni ma'am, you both said that NEP 2020 looks very promising in this aspect. Also, another point where NEP also speaks that teachers need to be counselors. They have to be at least having some basic idea about how they can counsel their children. I think that would definitely play a role into all of this. And before I move on, I'm going to do a small, quick, rapid fire with all of you about some questions about emotional health and your views on that. Before I go there, I would just like to once again go around and see if you have any other points to add to the discussion. I'll start with you, Rajni ma'am.
Yes, Gayatri, I do have. I very much buy the point of Daksha as well as Anne. We are talking about life skills. Question which I usually ask every teachers, educators, even students: what is value of your life? That is your decision. We make pedestal, actually the kids make some as a role model pedestal. The pedestal keep changing as we move from phase to phase in a life. Are we teaching that to our students? Now, other side, I would say, so this is very important for teachers to make also understand, the principals to also understand what is the value of your life. Without your existence, there is no value of your life. So you should know that your priority and what you can take at that moment. As Anne said, it's overwhelming at times. Yes, it is overwhelming. If you are in fear, if you are in overwhelming state, the best way is to just take a break. Do not deal with that situations. What happens is we start teaching the students to deal with the situation. Take a break, let it be. Many things unfold. So this side of uncertainty, we are not teaching to the students. Second part, I would say, talk about the educators. Teachers' core competencies. The roles and responsibilities of teachers are in the double brackets of, okay, number of periods, number of lessons, number of projects, as homeworks checked on these number of hours, 4 days in this, that it's restricted. No, core competencies, NEP should make it focus that core competency of the teachers, core competencies of the coordinators, core competency of the principals need to be defined with the socio and economical as well as life skills 50%. Otherwise, teachers are taking it as not a part of the job. They look forward, okay, this class is skipped, I just get a time to breathe or do my corrections pending work done. But no, the core competencies is something which I would suggest by all the principals to be redefined and remodeled. That is important. And third thing I would say, that accepting whatever comes in life, whether it is failure, I would say failure is the biggest success. The more you fail earlier, the higher you fail earlier, the better you are able to take the life challenges. You learn the lessons so well. So let the kid fail. But it has to be in a way where you create a very conducive atmosphere, whether it is in the playground classroom. RTE has done some harm, much harm to, in terms of not even touching a student, not even raising your voice to a student. If you consider school as a second home, I'm sorry being live, I'm not saying I'm advocating to trash a student, but yes, if as a parent I have right to pamper my child, if as a parent I have the right to tell him what is right and wrong, if I have the parent as a right to be stern and firm, teachers can have that much liberty, not beyond that. But yes, okay, bacha, this is not right for you. You have to understand, show him, let have a lot of case studies, let them deal with the case studies, let them jump into the case study. The moment they deal the case studies, they will break through their mind and understand, okay, if this situation comes in my life, I'm going to deal it this way. That kind of case study classes are very, very important. I think these are some additions I will do. Core competency, understanding the value of life. At the end, we are teaching life skills. And it is not teaching, it is making them realize, making them accept what is now, what will come. And if this situation comes, probably the situation may not come, because at times we bring certain topics in life till we create a fear among students. So we are just telling them, okay, this situation comes among few masses, some of them, not all. But But if it comes in future, we are making you a ready workforce to be ready with the life challenges. That should be the way it needs to be brought in. So that's from my side, Gayatri, which I would like to, with the closure.
Thank you so much, Rajni ma'am. Dr. Daksha, anything you would like to add?
Yes, I would like to add to what Ms. Rajni and Ms. George has already stated. So with respect to the core competency and the involvement of the faculty members, I would like to say that the more interaction is there between the faculty members and the students, the better it is for both the faculty members as well as for the students. Many times it so happens that during the class hours, it is not possible to interact with the students. So whenever the faculty members or whenever the teachers get time, they should try to interact with the students. And most importantly, it is for the faculty to understand the sociological and the psychological background of the child also. The family background of the child should also be known to the faculty, because many times the responses of the children come from their social background, sociological background, I would say. So that is also an aspect which the teachers should keep in mind. Another point which I would like to add here is that earlier we had Guru Parampara in our nation. So that is a welcoming concept. Now, this concept is not possible in the physical form, but whenever there is an opportunity for interaction, the faculty should never leave that opportunity. So my message to the viewers is that life is another name of infinite possibilities, hope. So please remain optimistic. Even if you are losing at present, there are many opportunities which are waiting for you. So acceptance is the key. Accept where you are. And believe me, if you feel that you are at the right place at the right point of time, you will be the success. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that message, ma'am. Miss Anne, anything you would like to add?
I was thinking about, the teacher and the classroom. And I was thinking that many times it's very difficult when we talk about suicide prevention. For us, mental health is taboo. You don't talk about mental health. And I am facing this in university. The reason I have named myself a student life coordinator versus the term counselor is because of that stigma that is attached to it. So going by the tenets of positive psychology, what we are trying to enable in the university is what is good, not what is wrong with you. How can we make things better? So I'm addressing all students, not just a few who have a problem. For that matter, I think all of us have a problem, but none of us are willing to be open enough. There are probably less than 5% who will come forward and say, you know what, I want to talk about something. So for me, what I feel teachers should be given that option. So I think Mr. was talking about teacher training. We have so many ongoing teacher trainings for, assessments and subject proficiency and blah, 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 blah. But then there is nothing to address how do you understand your child? How do you work with your children? Your children, just because they're 12 years old, they don't have all the same capacities. They should be seen as individuals. They should be understood as individuals. All of these are things that are probably foreign concepts to the teachers. Why do we just assume? And so I would say, just like we would send teachers for first aid training or, firefighting, whatever those, emergencies in school. We send teachers on those trainings. International schools, I know, do that. But then how are we training our teachers to address a mental health crisis? Are we addressing it? Should we address it? When a child comes up to a teacher and says, I can't do this anymore, will the teacher tell the student, no, 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 your life is very valuable. You shouldn't do that. Promise me you won't do that. At that point, what the child needs is just somebody to hear him out, not to tell him or her, don't. So with that, I would say schools should open that, normalize this mental health conversation in the schools, among teachers, among students, so that children find it comfortable to be able to talk about these things. So for me, I empathize with teachers because I spent most of my working life and I see both sides of the issue. But I still feel that children, being the ones who are vulnerable, need support from the adults in their lives, and we owe it to them.
That's such a beautiful thing, ma'am, that children look up and we owe to them. We really do. So I just want to quickly ask each one of you, what is your thought on possibly having a training for teachers or, the professionals who are into the world and dealing with children or individuals as a whole about something of suicide prevention training or a training which will help them, empower them with tools and techniques that they can work with as a suicide prevention worker or things like that, a training on that. What are your opinions?
Gayatri, I think that's a very positive move. Before that, I share on this. Mrs. George said something about this is coming from the international thought process of, coaching and training teachers. But if you see our own seat, we are ancient seat, India, we should be very proud of having Nalanda and Takshila University, where across the world, the scholars used to come and take the life skills training with academics in India. We have lost our past. We do have it. It is in our roots. We are again going back, taking it back to the fashion now. I would say fashion because people love these words these days. But actually, we are bringing our old concept back in the mainstream. We have lost the mainstream. There is a huge gap because we have tried filtering out the entire framework in such a way that we have just streamlined into academics. Now, over the years, I would say 34 years last, because 34 years before the new education policy is revised and all, now it's been 34 years. Now, in a huge time of 34 years, there's a huge generation gap also. Now we realize the harm with what we have done to our own education system. So we are bringing back those concepts of Takshila and Nalanda University, bringing art, music, sports, because we know the value of art therapist. We know the value of music therapist, because music brings a lot of, it is very high. That means you are at the best of your mood. If it is you're low, you're in the lowest form of your mood. Maybe you are under stress. Maybe you're under pressure. You can judge yourself. These are very, very important to be inculcated. Now, when you're coming to your question, I would say I'm really against the word training, and because I feel training is a word which is like taming anyone. Rather, we should say it is empowering the teachers. Empowering teachers are really needed because see, we come with a mindset of a B.Ed certification. We come either we are graduate, postgraduate, or a PhD. We come with a mainstream. Just doing a B.Ed, the entire concept of the material in the B.Ed is very high funda, which does not involve how to handhold a child in a very simple way. Like Mrs. George said, if a child comes, you should listen. We just say, okay, bacha, don't do, fine. He will be very happy because you have listened and say, okay, he wants to hear an okay. That's it. Later you guide him, he will listen to you and he will do it. No doubt about it. But these are not taught in the B.Ed. It is just a course in the program which you are doing it to certify yourself. So I think this move of bringing mental health empowerment, I would say, not mental health training, as a part of teachers, life skill sessions, teachers' life skill sessions or educators' life skill sessions need to be brought in a way, starting from valuing the life and then coming up with the possibilities of mental health, depressions, suicide case, drug abuse, adolescence, all to be handled with a lot of case studies will definitely help, because first we need to empower our own people whom we have given our children, because the student or the kids are more in contact with the teachers, more than the principal, more than the other stakeholders. Parents also, if you see, from morning to evening, the kids are with the teachers. So the maximum time of their life in the early childhood or to the age of 18 years, and as above 14 years, the rate of depression and suicides have gone high. The kids are with the teachers. So skilling them from the early age, because your motor skill development goes up to 8 years or 6 to 8 years of age. If we sow the right thing, but who is sowing is the question, again, the teachers. So empowering them and bringing the concept is very, very important. They should feel that they are their own children, which is now missing. I'm sorry to say, I've seen very few teachers still feel the kids are their own. So when you are in your classroom, it's your responsibility, it's your kids. Deal with them. School also have to also take care of the teachers, of how much pressure you're giving to them, what are the extra manpowers you're giving to them within a classroom. That's equally important. It's actually all these stakeholders' responsibilities together. But yes, bringing in life skills coaching or cognitive coaching for the educators is a requirement as an empowerment, I would say.
Thank you so much, Rajni ma'am. Over to you, Daksha ma'am.
I would like to add what Rajni ma'am has already stated, that training is not the right term, rather than empowerment is the right term. And I would like to add on further to this, that with empowerment, development term should also be used. So like, we
Right.
have faculty development courses, so it should be faculty empowerment and development courses on mental health. So if these courses are there, then teachers faculty members would learn as to how to deal with such cases and how they can be of some help to the students who are actually suffering from mental health. So if sort of assistance is not provided at the family level, then at the school level or at the university level, such sort of assistance shall be provided by the faculty members. So yes, this is the most welcoming concept and it should be there.
Thank you so much, Daksha. Miss Anne, what about you?
So in the context of empowerment and development, both of those words I liked. I just feel that the first thing that teachers require, faculty members require, self-awareness. And when there is self-awareness, there is a lot more scope for you to be able to, it's first understanding yourself, and in that context, being able to understand others. And given the fact that our teachers, I mean, we have a generation of teachers coming up. So I had this conversation with my father-in-law yesterday when he was telling me that teachers in his generation were the most revered. They were the pillars of society. In every community, there was a teacher that the whole small town would look up to. And that has moved on to, the job of a teacher. And that is a very sad thing. So the teacher is somebody right from the heart. And can our teachers work towards that? Because when I understand that I am educating, it is not me educating, giving them the jnana on biology or physics or chemistry. It is a holistic development. So we all come to the specialization. So when we talk to go to hospitals, there is a specialist, there's a nephrologist, there's an oncologist, there's an endocrinologist. So everything is compartmentalized. But what about that whole person? So when we are able to address the whole person, so as teachers, when they can see themselves as a whole person and therefore be able to understand the others, then such development and empowerment programs will take a lot more, will be much more deep-rooted, I feel.
Thank you so much, Miss Anne. And what a lovely discussion this has been. I mean, can go on and on and on for you guys. And I think definitely we need to have another round of discussion, because there is so much to speak about this topic and there is so little time with us. But it was lovely interacting with all three of you. And my key takeaways are like, along with working for the students, the first and foremost we need to work on is developing and empowering our educators so that they are self-aware, self-resilient, and are equipped to deal with the issues that the students of this generation come up. Because the new generation that is coming in is a generation of whys and why nots, as I like to call them. They have so many questions that, if unanswered, could be a really negative impact on the generation of tomorrow. So let's all pledge today that we as educators, we as change makers, bring about this change and empower those along with us and which are entering this field of education. We empower them and acknowledge the efforts and the sayings of the children. We become active listeners. We become active participants in what the children are doing. We increase our observation skills and we empower the children to face with anything, the uncertainties, the listening to no's, the failures, and embrace them, most importantly, for who they are. I think as educators, if we achieve these milestones, the generation to come will definitely see less number of suicides, less number of anxiety and depression attacks, and have a beautiful harmony in the society, which can go on for generations to come. Thank you so much, all of you, to be here and sharing your thoughts with us. And to the audiences, do follow us, subscribe our channel to see more such conversations, because this was just the second episode. We have many more lined up. So thank you once again, all of you, to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.